Hi, Dr. Ann. Thank you so much for coming on Thrival Nutrition Podcast today. How are you?
I'm so wonderful. Thank you so much for having me. Excited to be here.
Yes. So tell us a little bit about yourself, who you are and what you do.
Awesome. Well, my name is Dr. Ann Barter. I have actually two practices. I'm a chiropractor by trade, but I also do a ton of functional medicine. So we pretty much specialize in anything that is challenging, where someone has been here, there, and everywhere, and the medical community has failed them. And so we just do a ton of functional medicine, nutrition, practicing. We see a lot of PCOS, which I think we're going to dive into today, a lot of Hashimoto's, which is autoimmune thyroid, and then everything in between with gut health, etc. But it's just basically people that have been failed by the general medical community and told that they're normal and written off, but they still have all these symptoms.
Yes. I think it's so unfortunate, which I think it's getting a little bit better as functional medicine's getting more known. But when I get the same people of like, I've tried everything, I've been to all the doctors, I've been to great doctors that are very high up and they were, trained at these big prestigious schools, and like, they still didn't give me an answer. And so it definitely like gets under my skin when like nutrition and chiropractic and all these things that should be put first, not last, but we're the last person that they actually search for to like get help with. And I'm like, if only you might have come 5 years ago, for an example, like it may not have been as bad or gotten as bad to where now you have to give your body more time to like heal and just recoup from whatever.
100%. I mean, 100%. And I feel like they're using the big guns first. And it's like, oh, okay, well, wait till you get bad enough. Oh, there's nothing wrong. Oh, your thyroid gland is normal. Oh, we don't run hormones. They're not helpful at determining what's going on with your health. When in fact, if we can catch these problems sooner, the intervention that we have to do is so much more minor than, say, having to be on birth control pills or whatever it is, like a bigger intervention or having an organ removed. It's so simple to correct when you catch it sooner and you feel better, and it gives you that quality of life that is so important and what I think most people are looking for.
Yes. And I definitely see it with PCOS because I feel like so I'm on the other end of the spectrum with myself personally. So like there's people that like, they can have all the symptoms, but they're like, yeah, I'm fine. And they kind of brush it off. I'm the other end of the spectrum, only with myself though, not with clients, of being too sensitive to my body. And I listen to everything. So everything's like, oh my gosh, but I have the headache. What's going on? Which is a good thing and a bad thing. So I overthink a lot of things with myself. But I feel like with PCOS, there's a lot of things our body's telling us. And I feel like we're just waiting for that like official diagnosis to like actually do something about it. So I would love to like for you to talk about of just like your basic, like what is your hormones doing when you're diagnosed with PCOS? What's going on?
Well, one of the biggest things that you see with PCOS is you see androgen dominance, okay? And generally that means your testosterone as a woman is elevated. And so that's one of the first things that we see. And so the other thing that you will generally see is you can be estrogen dominant, but not always. And then also you just tend to have lower progesterone as a general rule. And you tend to have what we call high cortisol. So this is a whole bunch of fancy ways of saying that there is a lot going on. And the hormones are the first system to go and the last system to come back into play once you're getting healthy. And so you think about it because you do not need to have your hormones be perfectly functioning, say, if your thyroid is off or if your blood sugar is off or something else is going wrong in your body's like, let's abort mission over here with the female reproductive hormones because you're not in a position right now to get pregnant. We want to come back to that where we really focus on what's important here, like what's going on with your blood sugar gland, what's going on with your thyroid, what is happening with these other organs, what's going on with your gut, so that we can address these things first. But generally, as a general rule, I really see high androgens. And I want to make a point that sometimes testosterone is not high on just a lab test. Like if you run a blood draw, it's not high. There are other androgen markers that are the male hormone markers that we as women have that can also be high. And you've talked in past episodes about a Dutch test, and the Dutch test catches those. So if you're really suspecting that you have PCOS and your labs come back quote unquote normal, it might be important to run a Dutch test or something that's actually going to see like what the precursors to testosterone actually look like, because it can be missed. And I've seen that when women's testosterone is quote unquote normal in the reference range, that they have full-blown cysts on their ovaries. So when we're looking at reference ranges, and when we talk about functional med and all of that, I'm looking at different reference ranges. So for me, testosterone needs to be much lower than what's commonly looked at in the reference ranges. So I like to see testosterone at about 20 in women. A lot of times if women have testosterone at 40, you'll hear them say, hey, we potentially, my OBGYN saw a cyst on my ovary. She said it was nothing to worry about. But to me, that's a sign of elevated testosterone. Or at 40, you may not have cysts. And so you're told, hey, you do not have PCOS type symptoms.
Yes. So yeah, I would kind of like what I mentioned before with like there's symptoms that our body's like telling us and we just don't really listen, and then we wait for this diagnosis. What are some early symptoms that you find people have before they get diagnosed, before they, them questioning like I should probably get my hormones checked? What are they feeling?
I think a lot of times they have irregular periods. They have heavy periods. They have a lot of PMS before the periods. Some women have acne, quite a bit of acne. The other thing that we'll generally see is hair growth. It's like over the top. So if they're constantly getting laser treatment, constantly trying to get ahead of it, so really good sign that you potentially do have PCOS. Another sign that is kind of further down the line that we're seeing a lot more of and really drives women into practice is infertility. And so they're really having a hard time getting pregnant. And I just want to say, see women come in just so beaten down and broken when they feel like they can't get pregnant. This is not your fault. There are just a few things that need to be tweaked. So hang in there. And this is just a sign to say, hey, maybe you need to try a different approach, or hey, maybe you need to get something else looked at, because just something has gone out of balance in your body, and that just needs to be checked or addressed. But women really beat themselves up for this. And I also have heard too, women have told me, oh yeah, I'm bleeding a ton, I'm going through, just obscene amounts of pads and tampons, and oh, my doctor told me that was normal and welcome to womanhood. And that stinks. Like, we know that that's not right. Something's wrong in your body, and listen to that, because, no dig to men, but men don't know what it's like each month. And women, we're tough. And so if in my story getting into practice, just so was I was written off. I actually had PCOS symptoms, and I was having really heavy periods, and my periods were like 8 out of 10 pain level. I was told that it was completely normal. Welcome to womanhood. And and by the way, I confused my period cramps with my appendix exploding. And so I think that as women, we need to trust our instincts. And if something feels wrong with your cycle, go get that looked at, run a hormone test, ask for that.
Yes, definitely. Just like you mentioned with the like painful, like heavy periods, like anything, even with like PMS. So even before you like get your period, like the week before, and women start having like issues, it's very normal. And it's not normal, but it seems very normal in this day and age of having like, oh, cramps before a period. That's totally normal. That just means you're about to get your period. And I'm like, no, it doesn't. I'm very, very thankful that I've actually never had a painful period. So I don't really know what it feels like, but I definitely feel like if I had that, I just knowing me could not like really just sit there and be like, go through this every month. I would have to dig. I'm such a person that's like, I need to know what's going on. So there's answers out there. And I think that gives people hope, because I think they're so written off. It's just like, I'm just going to be in pain the rest of my life. And it does not have to be that way.
Right.
I think you bring up a good point with infertility too, because I feel like, do you feel like it's booming? I feel like infertility has like hit an all-time high than I feel like I've ever seen. And there's automatically of just like, okay, I'm not being able to get pregnant, and they jump right into IVF. And I feel like that's it. Like that's just the next step if you don't get pregnant.
Yeah, that's pretty intense. I feel like it's pretty common. I definitely like to tell women that we're exposed to 70,000 chemicals every single day. When I would talk about this, 7 to 10 years ago, I would say 85,000 chemicals every 7 days. So, I mean, our bodies are so toxed out. We drink as a social activity, which is fine, but ultimately our liver has to process those hormones, right? And so a lot of times we can't, and we have all of these things that we're exposed to that are endocrine disruptors. And then there's also been recent research that has come out that has said, the HPV vaccine, which is prominent in this group of women, coming up and really trying to get pregnant, has been linked to infertility. So there's also that. So, I mean, I think that from that standpoint, that is also affecting fertility. We have such severe blood sugar dysregulation. I'm seeing more and more autoimmunity across the board.
Yeah.
A lot of autoimmune thyroid. Thyroid is directly linked to infertility. I mean, the list goes on and on, but infertility is just a warning sign from your body saying, hey, something's going on here. You need to get it addressed. It can be everything from, environmental toxins to, hey, you live in a mold exposed house to, hey, like your liver is so backed up to, hey, you have a thyroid problem, etc.
Yeah.
It can be so many things that we're being exposed to, and you really have to take control of your health.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always an answer. And I know that it's like just to jump to IVF, which I know it can be frustrating. I'm sure it's just like, I just want a baby, but it is. It's your body saying like, slow down. You need to check out. You're not ready to get pregnant. If you do get pregnant, it may not be a healthy pregnancy. And it's just trying to tell your body, you got to get stuff together to create a healthy pregnancy. I would love for you to dive a little bit deeper about the relation with blood sugar regulation and PCOS. Because I find that I've listened to so many like keynote talks and everything, just talking about how that's one of the biggest foundations with PCOS, along with probably the first hormone disruption that kind of triggers a lot of everything else.
Right. So blood sugar disrupts the output of hormones. So what we've seen is that women will make more androgens when their blood sugar is dysregulated. We've been told to do this diet, this diet over here. Don't eat for a long period of time. You should fast. You should do all these things. And so there's so much confusion to women about what to eat, when to eat, that one of the first questions when people come in is they're like, I literally don't know what diet I should be on. I literally don't know what I should do, right? And so it's so confusing. Like, what do we do? How do we move forward? And so a lot of what I see on lab work is either I see everything from hypoglycemia to hyperglycemia to just sort of a metabolic syndrome. So hypoglycemia in reactive hypoglycemia is where the blood sugar is low on lab work, but you will also see swings during the day, right? And a lot of things can swing your blood sugar, right? So it can be what you're eating. It can be that you're drinking alcohol. And an example I like to give, because everybody's like, oh, it's just 2 drinks. It wasn't that big of a deal. So I kind of geek out. I'm like you. And so I was curious about what 2 drinks of wine did to my body. And so I'm not used to having a ton of high sugar food. I try to really avoid it. I try to watch what I eat. So I had 2 drinks of wine with dinner one night. It may have been a glass and a half of wine. And so my blood sugar runs at about 83 to 85, which is ideal fasting. Okay. And I checked with a glucometer like I had diabetes, and my blood sugar the next day was 200. The next morning, 12 hours later, my blood sugar was 200. What type of inflammation do you think that was causing in my body? How do you think that was disrupting my hormones? I mean, that is a huge blood sugar surge. And generally I run low, and you should only see blood sugar spike 30 points. So if you're having this low blood sugar and then all these spiking, then you're having problems. The second thing that I see is stress can drive blood sugar. Stress can be another thing that can actually drive blood
that.
sugar, right?
I feel that.
Amen, right? So, and we are stressed out. We have so much going on in our society today. It's like, I have to be doing this. I have to be doing this. I have to pick up my kids here. I have to do this. It's like, when do I have time for me? And so I think that stress is another big contributor to blowing that blood sugar, as well as simple things like eating too much sugar. Even though you don't have symptoms, like, again, another example I like to use is I love chocolate chip cookies, but they are not good for me. And so I did another experiment just to see that, oh, this can't be bad. I had 2 chocolate chip cookies before bed. I checked my blood sugar the next morning, and my blood sugar was at 198. So I slept on that all night long.
Wow.
And you're going to see these spikes with blood sugar. So blood sugar is directly related, and women will make more testosterone, right? And so ultimately that's what we're seeing. And then also, if there's constant stress going on in your body, it affects the gland called the adrenal gland. And this is not like a cry saying, hey, you need to take more ashwagandha, or you need to take more of these adrenal herbs, right? These adaptogen herbs. I think you need to figure out what is dysregulating the blood sugar first. Like, what's the problem? What's going on? Is it that you're eating a ton of sugar at dinner or something like that? Then maybe that needs to be addressed, instead of like being like, oh, my adrenals fatigued. Figure out what is causing fatigue in the adrenal gland and what is causing those cortisol swings, because cortisol steals directly from progesterone. And so we see that, a week before your period, when you're really feeling all those hormone symptoms, right? That's low progesterone. You're seeing a really, really low progesterone, and then you can make those androgens. Your adrenal gland only gets so much fat to run its pathway. And those sex hormones, progesterone, estrogen, testosterone, DHEA, those are all related to the adrenal gland. So blood sugar stabilization is really important. You have to watch high fructose corn syrup. You have to watch eating out. You have to watch all of these things and stabilize it, so you're not getting swings and like skipping meals and all of those things.
Yes, I definitely feel with the stress and blood sugar, because I eat pretty good, but I find certain foods also like increase me, which is so crazy because, like you said, it can go into the next day. So even white rice, something like really simple, that like you would have, it would naturally just spike mine for the next like couple days. It would just be on the higher side of things. But same with stress. Like, I can eat perfect, but if I'm really stressed out, I find myself having higher blood sugars. Fasting, I don't get as much of a severe spike, but it's not optimal ranges. So I'm always aiming for optimal ranges. So if it's not an optimal range, to me, it's high.
Right.
So,
That's perfect. That's perfect. I'm so glad you're doing that, because that's awesome. That's really true health to manage that.
yes. And I think everyone should have one of those monitors. Not even if you're not diabetic, I have one, because you can just see how foods react with your body. So like a banana may not raise someone's blood sugar as high, but it may crazy raise someone else's. So I feel like that's another way to really get like individualized of like what food works.
I love that. Perfect example. And you're so right. You're 100% right. Oranges, fruits do crazy things for certain people.
Yes, definitely. And then diving into a little bit of gut health,
Sure.
how that relates to PCOS, because kind of all starts in the gut. So I'm sure there's a correlation with that.
Definitely. I think a lot of things that I like to look at, you always have to look at gut health. I mean, again, if we're looking at blood sugar being dysregulated feeds pathogens in our gut. And like, so you can hang out with parasites or, fungal infections or, bacteria, some sort of dysbiosis. And then, for example, we have this whole thing going on now, SIBO, and all of these infections affect your blood sugar affects and feeds these infections. And then that also creates problems with your adrenal gland. So again, it's another way of your body saying, hey, we have to self-preserve. We're not ready to get pregnant at this point. Mm-hmm. And so what we need to do is we need to address these things that are causing so much dysregulation in the body. And so it's really important to take a individualized approach. There's no one way. If you have PCOS, some of my cases have SIBO. Some of my cases have SIBO, parasites, candida infections. Some of my cases were actually exposed to mold. And so mold is going to be huge dysregulator that I see in my practice. And I live in the dry state of Colorado. I see so many mold cases, and because we've had flooding here. And so people say, you know, like if for example, they're not getting better on a gut protocol that's specifically for them, or they run a comprehensive stool panel and they see something on that comprehensive stool panel that's an issue. A lot of times, and they get treatment and it doesn't help. A lot of times it can be a major endocrine disruptor like mold. Mold trumps everything else. Mold is like Lyme disease. And so when you're going through and you're like, oh my goodness, I've had this fungal infection forever, like you really need to think about, what was my exposure look like? Did I have something that dysregulated or created an issue on my immune system? What do I need to do to address that? So if you constantly have an infection that you're getting great treatment for that's not working, you need to look a little bit higher up. And then the other thing that these pathogenic gut bacteria do is they will dysregulate your ability to absorb those healthy foods that you're eating, right? And so, for example, when you start to chew and eat your food, you should have a high level of stomach acid. And stomach acid breaks this food down into small pieces. We're told as a society that we should be on protein pump inhibitors or you should lower your stomach acid. It's such a bad deal because your nutrients should be driven from your food. Hippocrates, you know, let your medicine be your food, which is ultimately the goal of a functional medicine practitioner. We really want to get you getting your nutrients from your food. We don't want you on supplements for long periods of time, but we have to clean up what was there. So first things first is you have to have really acidic stomach so that food can be broken down. And then if you go out to eat and someone's mishandled the food, you don't get a parasite that takes up residence in your intestines, right? And so ultimately it also protects us. So then when that food gets in our GI tract, we should be able to absorb it and get those nutrients from our food. But a lot of times in some of these hormone dysregulations and on, we start to get deficiencies. And so all of these pathogenic bacteria, whatever it is, parasites, fungal infections, bacteria, just not enough gut flora, will create that because we can't absorb our food. And then suddenly you run a food sensitivity and somebody's affected by broccoli and somebody else is affected by cauliflower. And you have all of these things that you can't eat and you have someone that's down to like 4 food groups. And so we have to just watch those things. That's kind of a long answer to your question, but I hope that summarized some of that.
No, it did. And two, just kind of how you said, like certain foods, well, you know, certain things that can really minimize that immune system in our gut, I think too, is stress. Stress is a huge thing as well that really downregulates our immune system, leading to yeast overgrowth and all these things just not working. So it does take an approach that you have to just look at like as a lifestyle. And then also, like you said, testing, don't guess. I feel like it's so easy in this. I feel like that's probably why, like, especially nutrition is underlooked. So like, I'll just Pinterest the new diet or whatever, and I'll just DIY it. But with health conditions, even like ashwagandha or I don't know, there's just so many supplements. People just hear things, podcast blogs. They're like, I'm going to try that. I'm just going to try this. And they're just starting to like try and take all these different things. And it's just like, you've never tested. You don't know what your levels are at, whether it's hormones, whether it's gut, and there's different antimicrobials that work with different strains. Like it's such an in-depth thing that like, I feel like some people try like being, you know, natural and try and do it natural, but it is costly. The tests are almost always costly with functional medicine, but at least you have that targeted approach to like your health and you're not trying to DIY it, which almost never works because then you're left with this like, oh, natural doesn't work. I tried it, but did you?
Right.
Not effectively.
I think that's an awesome point. And I also love the point that you bring up about stress, because if your gut is dysregulated and you're having any sort of problems in your gut, even leaky gut, even as simple as leaky gut, then ultimately you're not making neurotransmitters, which 95% of those are made in the gut. And so if you're constantly stressed out and you're constantly having this relationship with stress, that means that your neurotransmitters are low. And these are your feel-good things that make us happy. Like serotonin makes us feel good, but serotonin also creates the ability for your gut to contract, to move things through. So you'll see issues with constipation if someone has low serotonin, but they'll just be kind of apathetic about their life. Like they'll be like, yeah, I used to like to paint, but now I'm like, meh. And I used to like to see my friends, but now I'm like, meh. And you just don't have this love for life anymore. And so that's so hard to watch somebody go through life halfway. And then like dopamine, that's why people seek out long distance running. Like, why are ultra running? Holy cow. Like, they just keep running and running. Like we have the Leadville 100. Are you kidding me? That's a dopamine dump. And that's also why people will seek out drug seeking behavior, because you'll get a dopamine dump. But so many people are also deficient in dopamine, and that's just like your feeling of worthwhileness in life, your ability to be motivated and get your taxes done and do all these things. And then GABA, and I say when dopamine's low, you really look like Eeyore. You're like, meh, sacrifice the donkey, who cares about me? And you'll see like variations of dopamine deficiency. And then the other one that I think is really important that I see a lot come into practice is GABA. And people just feel like Tigger. They're like here, there, everywhere with lists upon lists. And they're just so excitable. And they're waking up in the middle of the night like, oh gosh, I've got to get all these things done. And they've got too many excitatory neurons going on. And all of these things are made in your gut that make you actually feel good and regulate your mood. And so again, these things get depleted with blood sugar dysregulation and gut health. And ultimately, at the end of the day, a lot of these things are higher up in your brain that control lower down your hormones.
Yes. Now as an adult, I look back at like Winnie the Pooh and I'm like, wow, like I feel like there's like a medical condition, like every single one.
It's so true. I love it though. I love doing that because those examples are so relatable because we're used to those. So it's awesome.
Pooh Bear definitely has some blood sugar issues going on with that.
He does. He loves his honey, doesn't he? I need to bring that into what I just said. I love that. That's such a good
and that belly.
I know, he's so cute.
So what are some of the number one labs when someone comes with PCOS? Like what is some labs that you prioritize?
So if someone comes in and they're like, listen, I really have hormone imbalances, I've got all these things. So I always run a basic panel. I can figure out a lot from serum lab testing, which is just a blood draw, as long as I'm running it at a certain time of the month, right? And so as long as I'm running it right before their period, like I said, there are some sneaky conditions with that sometimes can only be caught on a Dutch test. A Dutch test is superior when it comes to PCOS. It really is, because you can see all of the precursors, which is awesome. And then you can also see how someone's metabolizing, etc. But I can also get pretty good results. I can fix infertility. I can fix acne. I can fix hair growth issues for the most part with PCOS as well. And I fix cysts, etc. So I always have to see basic lab panels. That is a CBC and a CMP. So a CBC is where we're looking at white blood cells, red blood cells, monocytes, all of those things, because that tells me if someone has a systemic infection, how their immune system is looking. So I like to see that first to know what I'm working with, how much inflammation they have, because inflammation is directly related in hormone issues, right? Yeah. So then I also like to see what their blood sugar looks like. What is their hemoglobin A1C, which is a measure of their blood sugar over a 3-month period. I want to see what their liver health looks like. I want to see if they have any methylation issues, which I run homocysteine for. So we have all these genetic things that we talk about, MTHFR. And then I will just see what I generally see with hormones themselves. I love to see what pregnenolone looks like, because pregnenolone is really important in the pregnenolone cortisol steal. It's also very important for me to see what ideally what cortisol looks like. So you're not guessing on what's going on with the adrenal gland, because we know elevated cortisol is actually related in PCOS, but you always have to check. There's no hard and fast rules when it comes to hormone dysregulation. Again, estrogen, how they're converting. Are they able to convert to the active form of estrogen, which is E2 in women? How are they doing with progesterone and DHEA? So we want to see all of those things, as well as how they're breaking down their food. If I suspect gut health issues, and I think that there's definitely pathogenic bacteria, they're having a lot of bowel issues, a comprehensive stool panel is really what I like to see, especially if they don't respond to what I initially see on labs. So I love to see those tests. So in a PCOS test, in a PCOS case, you definitely always have to look at the gut. You have to rule out mold toxicity, honestly, in a lot of the cases that I see, for whatever reason here. So I definitely rule that out. Basic lab, CBC, CMP, really help me to see. And then Dutch test is my desired test.
Yeah, so that's like the queen of all hormones.
She is. She is.
What's your favorite way to test for mold?
So I use a Great Plains laboratory test. So I use Great Plains. They have a mycotoxin test on there. And so I think what's really important is to figure out on the history. Was someone exposed to mold? Did their fatigue symptoms start at that point? What happened with that? But also the other thing is, mold is hiding in your tissues. And so if someone's really having a hard time losing weight, and you're going to see that crossover in PCOS cases, like women come in and they're like, yeah, I'm eating 500 calories a day and I still can't lose weight. I'm like, holy cow. Like I would be so hungry. and they're like, but if I eat a little bit more than that, I gain all this weight, and I just eat 900 calories on my big days. And to me, that means that there's some sort of exposure going on that has happened, and their body doesn't want to get rid of something, whether it be, some sort of heavy metal, whether it be some sort of, they're eating tuna day in and day out, they've got high levels of mercury, they have mercury in their mouth, or whether it be, mold. One of the biggest things that I say about mold that I think is really important is you have to challenge mold out of the system, because a lot of the times the test can come up negative. So you have to have something that's going to chelate the mold out of your system and bind to it. And you really need to do that beforehand. What I think is the best is really doing heavy duty glutathione before you run the mold test, so that the body has a safe way to eliminate the mold. But you really want to do a heavy duty mold protocol, and a mold protocol can last, honestly, for 3 months to 3 years, and you will feel sick for the first couple rounds of treatment. There's just no getting around it, because it is such a disruptor in the body. It affects every system, and I cannot get somebody well if they've been exposed to mold. I get them about 80% well. But you really need to address mold first if it's a big issue.
Yeah, and it's one of those things too that I feel like it's the trickiest, because you can try everything, stool and hormone, and changing your diet and changing your environment of what you're putting on your body and all that. But if something's still up, mold's like so tricky, because it doesn't always have to be like, oh, I see mold growing on my wall in my home. It can be very, very hidden.
Right.
And it's not the first thing that comes to mind to people. Like, I've been exposed to mold.
Right. I lived in a moldy house, and I justified it. And I do this for a living, but I did not know I was in a moldy house. And I was like, oh my gosh, these aches and pains, I must just be getting older. I listen to this stuff come out of my mouth now, and I'm like, I am so ridiculous. I woke up with I would cough 3 times a day. I don't have any respiratory issues, but I'm like, that's weird. Maybe I'm getting allergies. And then I was like, my body itches, and I was gaining weight, but I wasn't gaining weight. I had a lot of inflammation. And then my hormones actually start to dysregulate. And I started seeing my thyroid markers going higher up on labs. I was still within normal range, but I started seeing antibodies to my thyroid gland starting to inch up a little bit. And I was like, what is going on? Maybe I'm just getting older. Maybe I'm working too hard. And I had all this justification. But the bottom line was I had lower energy. I had something else that was just not going right in my system. And so I really think that if you felt bad in a home, or you felt bad somewhere, it does not have to be dose dependent. Like, you don't have to live in a moldy house for 10 years. Some people are more genetically sensitive than others. And some people, it is as simple as being in a moldy environment intermittently. Some people it's living in it. Some people don't have the genetic predisposition to be affected by mold at all. But it's not dose dependent, which is like the really important thing. So if you've been exposed to mold, it can be an endocrine disruptor in your body. I've seen it turn on type 1 diabetes, Hashimoto's, etc. You name it.
Wow. Tell us a little bit about where we can find you. Where are you located? Do you see people virtually if they're not located near you?
Yeah, we will see people virtually. My website is www.altfam, short for Alternative Family Medicine. You can follow us on socials, Alternative Family Medicine Chiropractic. We are there, but if you want more information, we have a ton of stuff on our website. We have neurotransmitter forms to fill out, all of those things, and you can shoot us emails, ask us questions. But we have 2 offices. We're in the Longmont and Denver, Colorado area, so we have 2 offices.
Nice. And if they're out of state, I know it's kind of weird. Can you still see people, or do you have to see them once in person and then the rest virtual? Or
ideally once in person, just to get an idea, but there are people that we have seen just virtually, which is fine. Yeah.
Awesome. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on today.
You are so welcome. Thank you so much for having me. This was so fun to wrap with you, and I love what you're doing. You're doing awesome work, awesome tests. I just love it. We've got to stick together.
Totally. I agree. Thank you.
Thank you.